Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Quentin, French death metal band with really specific sound and lyrics inspired by French culture. This song is from a concept album around the life of Baudelaire, a famous poet. So let's dive into this. The band is called Misanthrope. Something tells me this is not going to be positive death metal, is it? The track is 1857. Let's dive in and see what they're bringing to the table today. I'm already having a bit of whiplash. Okay.
Let's groove now.
Dude, this is groovy. I mean, I could feel that groove, but the drums sort of laying down the steady backbeat really accentuates the syncopation of the guitars. And that bass line, golly.
Tournons ensemble quelques pages. Des fleurs du mal.
Got some slapping in there on the bass part too.
Outrage à la morale publique. Délit publié en chair. Et condamné en outre.
Oh, the gallops. Really tight staccato gallops too.
La morte de l'arrogance. Recueil à l'architecture immortelle. Auprès d'une vitesse affectée. Il obtiendra l'irrévérence. Pour sa conception de l'insolence. Les fleurs du mal.
Oh, okay. Recontextualizing the gallops. Oh, the drummer began to shift things up there and then brought it back.
Saveur acide du superficiel. Sélection du poète condamné. Comblé par le déshonneur officiel. Les fleurs du mal. Littérature abstraite. Sans un condamné idéal.
That's a fun little turn. I like that.
Littérature abstraite. Sans un condamné de cabale. Le souffle de la colère.
Yeah, subdividing into threes there instead of four. Okay. Just random jazz finger bass. The buzzsaw guitar cutting through that nice meaty bass tone. Ooh. Ooh, okay. Full on aggression. Wasn't expecting that from this group.
Scandale, controverse, connaissance des feux. Poésie de la révolte et du blasphème.
Vocal diversity too. Not a lot, but enough.
Pièce purgatoire. À la destinée posthume. Les fleurs du mal. Littérature abstraite.
That's such a fun part. we should double time it. I wonder if they're gonna do that. It's such an obvious thing, it would sound great. Yeah, they did it. That's fine. Bringing back the intro groove. Okay. Interesting last minute vocal shift. I'm a little mixed on that ending. I generally feel like the ending dragged on for too long. I think if the song had ended around minute 5, I wouldn't have felt that. But on the other side of the equation, there's a lot of new material in the final minute too. I'm gonna chalk it up to personal fatigue. Here's the thing about this: I really liked a lot of elements of this song, but it does have an early death metal sound to it. I think it's primarily the sonic palette, the engineering, the production of it. I'm not a real big fan of it. This is one of those cases where I like what's on paper generally. There's definitely some parts that kind of wear on me a little bit, but the way that it's produced, the sound that they went for, I'm not the audience for. And I think that's just what happened. I don't think it was a pacing issue there at the end. I think I had my fill at that point, not necessarily because of repetition, but just because of what it is they're doing. I want to start with what I really like though, because this song has a lot of really cool moments. First of all, let's just groove, right? We start the song off real strong. There is a lot of syncopation going on between both of the guitars and the bass guitar. And you could feel the groove, but without the backbeat, you don't have anything to compare it with, right? It's like if your whole life, you're constantly moving at 100 miles an hour, whatever that is in kilometers per hour for, the rest of the world. It's like you're going fast, right? But it's the only thing so you can't really understand that speed. And the same thing happens with groove. It's one of the reasons why I talk about contrast so highly on the channel, is because having something to gauge something against really helps you understand what is being done. Loudness really feels loud when you compare it with quietness. Speed really feels fast when you compare it with slowness. This comparison can come from anything, right? I can listen to a very different track right before this, and the comparison from, I don't know, say I'm listening to like Taylor Swift or something, and then I listen to this track, there's a lot of differences here. I'm going to feel this song more aggressively, more loudly than I would if I had listened to it in isolation. There's also context of an album, context of, a playlist would kind of fit into what I just said. There's controlled contrasts, which, like I mentioned, is album. What came before it? Controlled contrast, what are you going to put in the song itself? But then there's uncontrolled contrast, what the listener might have heard just before checking this out. Regardless, I don't have anything to contrast it with yet here at the beginning of the song. I have this cool syncopated riff. Okay, I can feel a bit of contrast. I am hearing a metronome in my head alongside it. That's giving me a little bit of groove, a little bit of contrast to feel the groove through, but I don't know what they're going to do with this. Then the drums come in. Pure metronome, backbeat. Let's emphasize 2 and 4, and that is it. And then you can really feel how these beats play off of that metronome of just locking in on the beat. And you can feel how a lot of these notes being off of the beat is creating a syncopation, which really emphasizes the groove. Now that we have a contrast point, we have two pieces of information, we can see the difference between them. I thought that was a cool way to introduce the track. Yeah, hint at something and then really freaking lean into it. 100%. I mean, there's no one who could listen to the beginning of this track and not just get hit with that groove. Maybe you don't headbang, maybe you don't move your body to it. I do. Music moves my limbs. I can't control that. Dude, I'm just sitting around the house in the kitchen cooking something. I have music in my head. I start dancing to it. I'm not a good dancer. I'm not trained at all, but my body it doesn't sit still when there's music anywhere, anything rhythmic, right? I tap my feet while I'm watching shows and stuff to background music. It's kind of annoying at times, but it's who I am. I've learned to live with it. But yeah, like I don't think there's anyone who can't feel that groove right at the beginning. It just comes in so strong. Is the first thing I noticed. That groove is consistent on this track. There are very few segments of this song that aren't groovy in one way, shape, or form. Even the fully driving sections, which are less syncopated, still have an element of groove to them because of the snare accent. It gives us it doesn't create syncopation in rhythm, but it does create syncopation in volume, which isn't a real thing. Syncopation deals with rhythm, but the idea here is variety of volume. And that gives us points where we know we should put more emphasis on and others where we don't. And that creates the well, that's syncopation. Dang, Bryan. We're talking about straight playing right here. But yeah, just having those snare accents against like the just like that constant bass kick going on. Every once in a while hitting a snare though, that's your accent point. That is your contrast against the bass line element. That's where the groove comes from. I still find syncopation to typically be more groovy, but you can certainly create groove with straight rigid rhythms like that, and I think they did a great job showcasing that. Very few moments of this song was I not moving. It's just that infectious listening to them on the rhythmic elements. The other part of this track that stands out to me is the bass. I don't want to talk about that yet though. The guitar riffs are hit and miss for me. And I don't want that to sound like some are good and some are bad. I'm not a real big riff guy. I like melody, right? You give me a tight 4-beat riff that a guitarist is going to play. You put some pedal tone in there, metalheads are going to go crazy. They have that here. And you get like, you got that pedal tone groove underneath, and you got the cool rising and falling idea. This band used that all over the place. Pedal tone, moving, punctuating idea for the end of a riff. Return back to that pedal tone. Metalheads go crazy for that. I don't. It's cool. It's got that rule of cool feel to it. I don't mind it. I don't hate it. I don't go out of my way to listen to it though. If I listen to music with it, which I am prone to listening to stuff with more simple guitar work, and I do like my pop side of music, especially pop rock, pop punk, pop emo. I'm not there for the riffs. I'm usually there for the vocalist or the energy of the song, which I suppose is probably the same for metalheads too. Some people like riffs like that, but some people just might be here for that infectious rule of cool energy that they've got going on it too. I don't know. I'm not a fan of it, so I can't really speak to why people would listen to it. But they got that rule of cool energy going, and I can't argue with it, man. Some of these riffs just sound cool. It's not something I'd go out of my way to listen to, but I mean, dang, it's just got that energy, right? That riz. I'm never saying that again. It's got that aura to it, you know. But generally speaking, when it comes to the guitar riffs, I enjoyed the other half of them, the ones that are more flourishy, more melodic, focusing on moving ideas, constantly pushing forward. Now, we kind of lost the syncopation in some of these, although we did have some that mixed melody and syncopation together and just really great guitar licks. Those were certainly my favorite. But there's a nice variety of guitar phrases in here, whether you like more straightforward ones, more fancy ones, stuff that sits in the middle, stuff that's more melodic, stuff that's more groovy. They hit on all of it, right? I think this song has a little something for everyone as far as guitar work, and I really appreciate that. But y'all know what caught my attention. I already dropped I already foreshadowed this. The freaking bass, man. Y'all heard that, right? Right from the start, right? The guitars come in, the drums come in, we got this stuff, and then the bass. Sick, man. Fast, technical, precise, spicy. If we wanted any sort of harmonic spice, some plane of notes outside of the current key, the guitars never did that, man. They never did. The bass did. Anytime the song needed to get more interesting, the bass is like, I got you. I got some friends in this other key. We're going to pull them in. We're going to play around with this a little bit. That bassist was just gnarly and all finger playing too. Beautiful tone, excellent melody writing, just precise performance. We didn't get enough of it, did we? More often than not, I found the bass doing doing pedal tone stuff alongside those pedal tone riffs that the guitars were doing. It's nice that I mean, this is like a staple of a lot of metal. Is the bass is just playing what the guitars are an octave down. It's nice that I can hear it. So much metal just kind of covers the bass up in the mix, even though you should be able to hear them. They're providing that low end element. But, I can hear the bass here, and I don't have to assume, oh, the bass is probably just, in the shadow of the guitar. They absolutely are. They're playing exactly what the guitars are doing, but I can hear them in the mix. They're not hidden in the shadow. They're front and center. And then they play these sick ideas, and I'm like, yeah, give me more of that. And he's like, best I can do is play the E string over and over right now. I'll come back to some fancy stuff in a second. And yeah, I'm a bit disappointed by that. I mean, you can't just have shred an entire song. You got to have balance, right? I just feel like the balance wasn't good enough at times. But the bass did get an elongated solo in the middle of this track, and I was totally here for that. The cool thing is the guitars kind of quit out for a second. We get to focus on that bass work, and I actually get to hear a lot of how the bass is being played. And I think what's interesting is listening to the attack on the bass. There's usually a lot of high-end overtone going on, especially on the lowest string. You don't really hear this too often in finger playing metal stuff. I don't know if that's a production thing or a literal technique, but it's something that I just don't hear too often, even in fretless virtuosic playing in metal. Bands like First Fragment, right, or Archspire, Tech Death specifically. You can hear some phenomenal finger playing bass work in Tech Death. But they don't have this higher end overtone to it all. That's something I primarily hear a lot of in jazz, and I wonder if that's just because there's not a lot of production on electric basses in jazz. You sort of plug in, bump your volume up a little bit, and that's it. You just need to make sure your instrument's heard. Whereas with metal, you tend to put some fuzz on it, a little bit of distortion, maybe a little bit of overdrive, not too much. You want to have that big meaty tone, but it can't be too soft. This, though, sounds like he just plugged straight into an amp, used it to get a little bit of a volume boost so people could hear, and played. And so it ends up feeling a bit jazzier, not in what he's playing, but how the sound is produced. Although, also on the other side of it, that solo was freaking jazzy too, as far as notes chosen, when they're chosen, how they're played, how they're worked into the context of the rest of the notes, the harmonies, the chords that are being played. It was a very jazzy idea there. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. The precision, right? Bass can be a little bit of a difficult instrument to play fast, given that its frequencies are pretty low. It can get muddy. And here, I'm sure some of it is just performance, just really having tight control over when strings stop vibrating, ensuring that there's not a lot of cross bleed on notes and stuff like that. But there's also probably some production stuff going on too. It's just exceptionally clean and precise. It feels so good, as if I was listening to an electric guitar with the thinner strings and the higher registers that just have less of this bleed over of notes. It's less muddy. Yeah, exceptional all over the place. Production, setting up the tone, the hardware, the performance of it. Just every step. This bass is phenomenal. It saved the song for me. It really did. I hate to put so much weight on one instrument, and I really don't want to throw any shade at anyone else. The drum work in here is pretty cool. The riffs, I already talked about the guitar work. And the vocals, I got some positive things to say. I'm not too big on them. It's mostly the harsh style. Nothing to do with the technique behind it. It's just not my cup of tea. But I mean, the bass was my cup of tea, and I think that's the thing. I'm not throwing shade at anyone else, but it's the one thing I really clicked with, really connected with on this track. And so I'm gonna gush about it. I have nothing negative to say about that bass sound, performance, tone, music, what was written for it. It just so good. I just wish we had more of it. That's it. That's it. It did metally stuff too often. I wanted that jazz metal stuff more often than we got. The drummer. There's some cool ideas in here. I particularly like the drummer's fills moving into and out of sections. Usually the verse into the chorus was a rather harsh transition for everyone. I'm not going to put that on the drummer's shoulders. But when there was some sort of movement into a new idea, the drummer usually led that charge. And there's some really cool cymbal-based stuff going on. A lot of drum fills tend to be tom and snare. Usually you hit a crash cymbal at the end to signify, the phrase is over, the fill is over, moving into the next thing. It's the big exclamation point at the end of the sentence. But this dude uses the cymbals inside of the fills and always seems to push against any rhythmic flow. A lot of the fills in here, well, let me preface this a little bit. A lot of the rhythms in here are just snare 2 and 4. We got a backbeat accent here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll tell you what, that got in my head. Right? 5 minutes in, I'm still hearing the snare every other beat. I'm just like, dude, it's too much. Switch it up or something. I don't know. It could just be a production thing too. But it was just, it's like when I listen to electronic music and there's this one sound that just pops up like every beat, every other beat, every fourth beat, just like a really rigid, repetitive sound. Not a riff, not a melody, not anything, just one specific sound. And it just happens for like 10 minutes of an electronic track. Same spot every bar, and it gets on my nerves. It drives me crazy. And the snare started to do that for me. I'm putting that on me, right? I'm not saying the band was bad for this, not saying the drummer was bad for this. Maybe production might have putting less emphasis on it. I would have noticed it less. I don't know. But this is definitely a me problem. This is a skill issue. That snare started to drive me crazy. But there's so many other cool ideas, right? So if the snare accents every other beat, we look at some of the drum fills, they get broken up into threes. Instead of ka, ka, we have ka, 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 So we have this 3, 3, 2, which is 8 beats, which gives us 2 bars of 4. So these fills usually worked at the last 2 bars of an idea. It's pretty cool, actually. And I really dig that little switch up there. And actually this triplet, well, not triplet, but focusing on groups of 3. A triplet is specifically putting 3 hits within a beat. This is just emphasizing every third hit or every third beat. But yeah, this sort of felt like we could use this to push into the double time feel, which I really thought they were going to do underneath the gallops at the end. I thought that would have been pretty cool. We did get the double time feel, but we got a totally different guitar riff on top of it that wasn't the gallops. So it just felt more aggressive. But yeah, I enjoyed the fills here. The vocals, I don't really have much to add to that. It's neat that there's a variety of pitches. It almost sounds like he's putting a raspiness on top of a very soft spoken vocal style. So it sounds primarily harsh, but he has access to pitch. And it actually kind of sounds spoken, speech like at times. It's very cool. I don't know how he's doing it. I'm impressed by that, but it's not a sound that I find palatable. It's just harsh vocals are mostly missed for me anyways, so I don't want, if that dude happens to be watching this video, no shade at you, man. I'm not the audience for your vocal style, and honestly most metal vocalists, I'm not the audience for them. um but I want to take a second. I've been focusing on like very specific nitty gritty elements of this, but I want to talk about the passage of the track as a whole. I like the control of it, the pacing, the flow of the song. We're constantly moving between ideas, whether it's groove or whatever you want to call that bass solo. It was just freaking awesome. Is that what we can call it? I don't have a different description for it. Then we get into like driving rule of cool metal stuff, and then aggressive, just metal weight and aggression. I mean, there's parts in here where I don't think we had blast beats. Well, we had 16th note bass kicks and just like constant strumming going on, just really creating a feeling of weight. And I think the song does a great job of doling everything out in measures, or having measured elements, measured amounts of each element, so that none of them really were overbearing. Because I think if we had stuck with some of the more aggressive, extreme sounds too long, I might have disliked the song a bit more than I already did. Um, but they found ways to sort of balance things rather nicely. There's a lot of elements in here that I liked more so than others, and I feel like they got an equal weighting of everything else. And so it creates a song that I found there was always something to look forward to, but it also was paced nicely as well. I felt like we had rising energy, we had falling energy, and this created a nice flow, a nice like pulling through of the story of the song. We never really stuck with anything for too long, and it allowed the song to feel like it had a nice brisk pace to it, but it never felt like we were just, careening through this song. Everything felt like it was given the right amount of time and respect to be explored fully before moving on. So, and even like I said, right up to the end, man, we had new riffs in the final 30 seconds of the track. There's always something new around the corner. So, yeah, I mean, this is I feel kind of bad speaking so negatively about it when I think in the end my opinion is that it's a good song for everyone. I don't know how many people are going to enjoy every single element of it and just really engage with it on the whole, but I enjoyed like half of this. So that's pretty good. They're constantly tossing new things in there to keep people's interest. And I think it's fun. Like the commenter said, I forgot their name. I apologize. Um, that they're a unique sound in metal, and I agree with that. We've heard funky bass stuff in metal. Tech Death has a lot of cool metal work in it, and we've heard groove metal before, and we've heard aggressive extreme metals. But I don't think we've ever heard anything that just smashes all that together into, honestly, a fairly palatable package for being death metal. It isn't as heavy as I expected. It isn't as overbearing. The production is actually very airy and light. It's very clear without being pristine or too clean or clinical. It's just very measured in a lot of ways. And I think some people who like the grittier, darker, edgier metal is going to find this to be a bit too light, but I think it's a really nice midpoint between the dark side of metal and maybe something like the poppy side of alternative metal or modern metalcore or something like that. It walks a fine line on a lot of spectrums, and it creates something that to me at least feels a bit unique and always has something interesting around the corner. Let me hit some lyrics on this, and then we're gonna wrap this video up. The irony of this. This is a breakup song about being in despair at the end of a relationship. Uh, and of course, this week's theme has been love songs to coincide with tomorrow, I believe, Valentine's Day in the US at least. It says, we made it through September with lust and dying embers. Tell me, is that all we were? Now look at what we've done. Look at what we've become. What 3 words will do. And you said I won't be there when you fall. I won't be there when you break down. That's an interesting description. We made it through December with lust and dying embers. So basically saying that for the past X amount of time, whatever that is, it's September now, but for some time, the spark of the relationship has been dying. All that's left are dying embers, flakes of the fire already decayed. That and lust, the physical element, is really the only thing that kept the relationship going. It says, dark-haired girl, where did you go? You live in a broken world and we stand alone, but darling, who knew that when we were created we'd be suffocated by such despair and loneliness? Still, we stand as a witness and die by the sickness that this thing called love induces. This is a very negative take on love. I can get it. I wonder how old they were when they wrote this, though. Well, I suppose how old the lyricist was when they wrote this. Because there is something a bit over the top, very emo about this that I dig. I really do. But I don't really think matches the feelings of the song too much. And I think that's just because I relate this over dramatic, life sucks, my heart's broken, I might as well die, with like post hardcore and emo music. Metal, I just have a very different relationship to what kind of themes they sing about and how they sing about those themes. But this thing, right here at the end, it says that they will stand witness of this sickness that the thing called love induces. It's looking at love as a negative thing. If we hadn't have loved, we would not be miserable like this. And that always hit me pretty strong when I was younger. I find I grew with it a lot less these days. I'm much more of the better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all kind of person at this point in my life. I think love can be beautiful, but it can also be fleeting, and that should be understood at the beginning of any relationship. But when you're younger, every relationship seems like the one. You don't have to worry about it ending. And so when it does, it's a gut punch. And you feel lower than ever. So like I get this, right? From a perspective, and it's campy, but I dig it, right? It's in my wheelhouse for lyrics. At least a part of me, a younger me. But reading it now, like I said, I'm very distanced from this mentality, but I can get it. But again, I have a tough time hearing the relationships between the music in this. The music to me is a blast. It's a fun time. I couldn't stop talking about all of the cool ideas, the little rhythmic twists, the groove, the fantastic bass work. I don't see how these lyrics fit into that view that the music gives me. Just a very different emotion out of that. So, I mean, this could just be a situation where the lyrics were written and divorced from the music. He just had a poem he needed to get out, and the guitarists and drummers put a song together and they smashed them together. That happens often in all sorts of music. Yeah, this is like a really interesting track for me then. And the schism between the themes of the music and lyrics, just it's the icing on the cake of me being 50-50 on this. Geez, those are my thoughts. Misanthrope's 1857. What's that date have to do with anything either? I'm a bit lost on that. Um, Let me know if you enjoyed this though. Put in the comments if you have any extra conversation things you want to add to this. Correct me on places where I might have been wrong. You have your own interpretation, your own opinion, thoughts about this. Just toss all that in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.